Welcome, everybody. We've got Asher here, and he's going to be talking about wild animal suffering. Asher Soryl is an independent researcher at More Lucid and a PhD candidate at the University of Otago. His current projects are concerned around panspermia, valence, and phenomenology, as well as alternative ontologies for studying brain aging and consciousness. Many thanks for joining us today, and really looking forward to your presentation. Just so everybody knows, Asher will be giving a presentation for 30 to 40 minutes, and then after that we can have some questions.
Great. I'll share my... Here we are. Can you guys see all of this? Fantastic. Yeah, let me hide that. Cool. Yeah. So, yeah, as you mentioned, my name's Asher. I'm going to give a talk today on the welfare of wild animals, which happens to be the topic of my dissertation research. As you can see, I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Otago. I've been doing that for a while. It's now kind of like less of a priority finishing it, but I'm actually very close to finishing. I'm aiming to have it done by the end of the year. When I say the welfare of wild animals in particular, I'm talking about the welfare of free-living wild animals and how conditions which are present in nature might affect the quality of their lives, independent from the actions of humans. I think this is a worthwhile question to ask, given that like most of wildlife philosophy and ethics focuses on like how wild animals are negatively affected by human actions. For example, as a result of climate change or deforestation, whenever humans go and intervene in nature. I think maybe these issues are important to address for various reasons, but they often carry the implicit assumption that wild animals lead fairly happy or contented lives in nature, such that our actions which affect their livelihoods make them worse off than the counterfactual scenario in which we left them alone. And my basic argument throughout this talk is that despite our intuitions, we actually know very little about the welfare of wild animals under natural conditions, and moreover, we have prima facie reasons to suspect that in many cases, the overall quality of their lives is possibly very poor. Because of the nature of this topic, I should also note that there might be some distressing or uncomfortable images in these slides, but most of the talk is going to be theoretical. And one thing I'd like everyone to do is just, in your minds, imagine your favorite wild animal and just like hold it in your mind. And I'll come back to that later. So to start, when you think about wild animals living in nature, what's the image that comes to mind? Do you imagine chirping birds and prancing deer in a forest glade, roaring lions hunting wildebeest in the African plains? These examples are fairly common and are often what we see on TV and advertising depicting nature and the lives of wild animals. Maybe they even reflect our own experiences being in nature. For example, if we go on hikes or maybe sightseeing while on holiday. But how accurately do these examples reflect the average lives of wild animals? Are we seeing the full picture, or are we only seeing a glimpse of it? So the romanticization of nature is a fairly well-documented phenomenon in which its aesthetic and perceived harmonic qualities are overemphasized in relation to facts which are otherwise considered less interesting or distasteful about it. So, for example, we often talk about nature as a mother that nurtures, or as a balance of perpetually stable states that exist in harmony with one another. These ideas invoke ancient teleological beliefs about order and design in the natural world, in which wild animals serve an important purpose or function within natural ecosystems. Failure to perform their assigned roles might disrupt the delicate balance of interdependent ecological processes and then ultimately create disorder and disharmony, worsening their lives. I'm sure you've all seen the film The Lion King, where the African savannah is quite literally a kingdom with an established order and a ruling monarch. In an early scene, we see this idea explicitly addressed as Mufasa tells Simba, "Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. We eat the antelope, but when we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. So we're all connected in the great circle of life." However appealing this view of nature might seem, such beliefs have for the most part, since the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species, exited mainstream science to be replaced with more mechanistic and chaotic interpretations of natural ecosystemic functioning, rather than tending toward a balance of perpetually stable states or homeostasis or equilibrium. Ecosystems are characterized by their dynamical nature and, crucially, the absence of stable states. Maybe the earliest documented example of doubt in nature's balance came from Alfred Russel Wallace, who's best known for independently formulating the theory of evolution via natural selection, like around the same time as Darwin, who wrote in a notebook entry, "Some species exclude all others in particular tracts. Where is the balance? When the locust devastates vast regions and causes the death of animals and man, what is the meaning of saying that balance is preserved? To human apprehension, there is no balance but a struggle in which one often exterminates another." Despite all of this, survey research suggests that belief in nature's inherent balance persists from many sectors of society and across different levels of education, including within ecology departments at universities. The concept of nature is itself something that we often take for granted without being very clear on what exact parts of reality it's pointing towards. Maybe it's a useful concept to internalize for various purposes related to how humans are modeling the world, such as if we want to classify differences between city and forest landscapes, but it often carries a set of implicit aesthetic and normative values regarding the role of humans in nature and the harms our actions seem to cause. To take another example from Disney, in the film Bambi, all of the animals live in harmony with one another and are happy until man comes along and disrupts their happy lives. And again, this reflects a common narrative that we should avoid interfering with nature and preserve its integrity for the sake of wild animals who, being free, have acceptable levels of welfare when left alone. Call this the idyllic view of nature. We also see this view expressed in, more realistic forms of media, such as wildlife documentaries. You can see there Blue Planet and Planet Earth, two very common wildlife documentaries that people watch. These shows are supposed to present us with objective, impartial facts about the natural world. They've long attracted criticism for anthropomorphizing the behavior of wild animals for the sake of entertainment, but more seldomly discussed is that these forms of media usually depict a very non-representative sample of healthy adult wild animals usually mammals, who seem to lead relatively happy lives in their natural state. I'll come back to this later. But sometimes, we see these animals predated upon. But when this happens, we, the audience, are reassured by the narrator with homely platitudes about nature's balance and the good of the herd. I want to say, how can we talk about the good of the herd without considering the welfare of the individuals who make it up? If we reject the balance of nature view and we reject the notion that ecosystems do actually tend toward optimizing for states such as well-being or states that are correlated with well-being. In response to all of this, you might ask, how much does this all matter, given how wild animals are depicted, in film and TV? Their main purpose is to entertain us, and actually nobody believes that wild animals can communicate with one another using human languages or establish functional monarchies in the African savannah. And moreover, in relation to wildlife documentaries, maybe certain aspects are exaggerated to present a more compelling narrative. After all, they are entertainment, but they can't change the raw footage. And this is a fair point. And bringing up these examples, I'm not trying to, change what media you consume. Or I'm not even trying to say that these are unethical or immoral. I certainly enjoy Bambi, and I enjoy watching Planet Earth. But I want to bring them up as examples to show that, I think it's plausible that they could be a source of bias for how we think about the natural world when we just think about the lives that, the conditions that wild animals face. Otherwise we have generally very little contact with them, or it's very difficult to be able to see, the conditions that they face independently from there being humans with recording equipment. Insofar as our implicit understanding of nature shapes our ethical beliefs about how wild animals should be treated, we should strive to have a more accurate picture of what their lives are actually like, even if it doesn't conform to our preconceptions. To think about this issue more clearly, consider the following two circumstances which are present in nature. So there are finite resources and the existence of evolutionary processes. And these are present in virtually any ecosystem, or any natural ecosystem, I should say. So first, resource scarcity sets a natural limit on resource consumption for a given environment, beyond which the carrying capacity for that environment is exceeded. Such limited resources include energy sources such as food and water, in addition to structural features that are used for various purposes, including shelter and protection. And then secondly, evolutionary processes are fitness-oriented, meaning that they bias the selection of heritable traits to optimize for gene transmission in the overarching context of an organism's evolution. If new traits are, like all things considered, fitness enhancing, this means that they aid the process of transmitting or replicating a genetic material to a sufficient degree that compensates for the energy cost, and this makes them more likely to enter the gene pool, which creates evolutionary change over time. And yeah, importantly, these processes occur without regard to how much a given trait improves or reduces an individual's welfare, which often results in animals evolving antagonistic or predatory relationships with one another. Sometimes they, optimize for survivability, but only to the extent that survivability is instrumental to reproduction and the passing on of genes, and so it's not always intrinsically accounted for. So, for example, redback shrikes impale their living prey on the thorns of acacia trees for later consumption. Hyena work cooperatively to distract wildebeest and antelope mothers so that they can disembowel their living offspring. Venomous snakes cause internal bleeding and paralysis. Kelp gulls have been seen to mortally wound seal pups by attacking and consuming their eyeballs. Similar suffering-inducing capacities have developed in prey animals in defense to these attacks. For example, the Arizona bark scorpion, while also a predator, defends itself from the attacks of desert mice by injecting them once with its barb to, quote, induce an intense burning sensation, followed by several hours of excruciating agony, end quote. And then likewise, the venom produced by platypus is not always lethal, but there are human reports that it causes immediate and excruciating pain, which sometimes develops into long-lasting hyperalgesia, which persists for days or even months. Then secondary effects of predation might include contributing toward a landscape of fear perceived by animals living in a near constant state of heightened awareness and stress under threat of death. Findings of PTSD symptoms such as memory impairment, learning disability, and other anxiety-related behaviors in rats that have been exposed to predators indicate their potential to experience long-lasting psychological distress, which extends to other taxonomic groups consisting of animals living in the wild. In fact, I would argue that a lot of these kind of mental illnesses, if you will, like PTSD and anxiety, actually evolved as an adaptive response to being an organism under conditions where there are these threats and having to update your world model in such a way where you're actively taking actions to avoid being eaten, which would result in your genes not being passed on, and so on. And so, yeah, maybe we tend to think about, mental health often in the case of humans because we're humans and we only really interact with other humans and talk about our internal states with other humans. But these are actually, I would say very, plausibly, convergently evolved or, they're present across different taxonomic groups, not only humans. So yeah, these examples concern harms that are caused by antagonistic relations between wild animals in response to resource scarcity. But the circumstance of resource scarcity itself probably causes significantly more harm, as many animals starve or become malnourished without food, dehydrated without access to water, and then suffering slow and painful deaths as their organs begin to rapidly lose function and shut down. Other times, wild animals suffer from causes that are unrelated to resource scarcity. So there are many everyday injuries that maybe we brush off, falls, twisted limbs, fractured bones. Obviously, we have access to healthcare. If an animal has has a fall and twists their ankle or breaks a limb, then that could just basically be considered a death sentence. They have no reprieve and they have often little support. Some animals have obviously evolved support networks, but this is a very small fraction of the total life history strategies that we see in nature. I mean, humans are one of them. I'll come on to this later. Another thing is, extreme weather conditions. Animals obviously don't have shelters or homes to retreat into with thermal regulation. This is something else that we take for granted, the fact that we have houses that are relatively weatherproof. This is extremely uncommon and very recent in the phylogenetic history of life. Also natural disaster. And then disease. So disease is another significant source of suffering for wildlife, and is typically understated given its prevalence, persistence, and long-term negative effects on welfare. So again, to contract an infectious disease as a wild animal could be considered a death sentence, especially because they don't have access to, as I said, healthcare, shelter, or various other social services that we have readily available. And even if the disease isn't fatal, maybe it's just like the equivalent of a common cold, its detrimental effects on one's ability to forage, evade predators, or engage in various other behaviours that are necessary for survival will often result in their death. Microparasitic diseases such as rabies and mange are likely to cause extreme amounts of prolonged suffering over the course of their duration. Obviously, the fox in this image can't just go into a pharmacy and I don't know, get ivermectin or whatever other kind of rabies treatment that would be available for humans. And then there are also larger insects such as blowflies that have evolved in such a way where they burrow, feast, and lay their eggs in the living flesh of large vertebrates. So especially nasty examples include most parasitoids, such as the jewel wasp, which administers powerful neurotoxins into the brains of cockroaches, making them docile and compliant to predatory mutilation, eventually laying an egg for hatching larvae to burrow inside their living body and consume their vital organs. But still, there are a fair number of wild animals that, evade these harms and have okay and even enjoyable lives. Certainly, I don't want to claim that, there's no meaning in the life of a wild animal, like animals that live to a ripe old age, and especially if their life history strategy prioritizes, nurturing for and caring for offspring, and they have strong eusocial bonds, there is actually, there's a lot of meaning and there's a lot of satisfaction, and certainly, there are lots of lives that are worth living. Maybe you could say conceivably this compensates for all of the suffering that's otherwise present in nature, at least to the degree that we'd have few moral reasons to consider this a problem relative to other moral problems that demand our attention. This leads us to the second issue that I'd like to raise in this talk, which is that when we idealize nature, we're not only romanticizing the lives that certain wild animals lead, we're also misrepresenting their demographics, and in particular the taxonomic classification and life history strategies that most wild animals have. So quickly returning to the question that I asked at the start of the talk, if you just imagine the animal that you thought of before, usually I'd be given this presentation in a room where I could get a show of hands, but I will ask how many people thought of a mammal or a reptile or an amphibian or maybe a fish. And then maybe finally invertebrates such as insects or cephalopods. Well, if we take into account the number of sentient beings that might exist at any given time, we find that mammals represent only a tiny portion in comparison to most other wild animals. Typically, when I give this presentation, most people raise their hand at mammals, or usually you get some cephalopods, but it tends to be skewed very much in the direction of organisms that make up a very small fraction of the total number of organisms in the wild, or at least animals. For mammals, preliminary estimates place them in the range of 10 to the power of 11 to the power of 12, while it's thought that amphibians and reptiles might number up to 10 to the power of 14 separately, and fishes potentially 10 to the power of 15 and higher. It's very difficult to do research on these numbers. And I mean, this is just one example of speaking to how little we know about the conditions in nature, and even just the number of organisms that are alive at any given point. This is still a very big open question. But yeah, this is a rough picture, but it broadly would reflect the distribution. And the increase in orders of magnitude shouldn't be underestimated. Numbers that are multiplied by powers of 10 increase exponentially. So the number 10 to the power of 13 contains 100 sets of the number 10 to the power of 11, and so on. And this means that if we pull together every mammal, bird, amphibian, and reptile and fish into existence, mammals would probably only account for 0.0009% of the total number of extant vertebrates in the wild. And this isn't even considering the number of invertebrates that exist. So like before, I'm not saying change the example in your head to more accurately reflect an average in the pool of extant wild animals. But what I hope to show is that again, we might have a bias toward organisms which are more phylogenetically related to ourselves when we think about like the average white animal, or we think about white animals in general. And then moreover, when you pictured that animal in your head, did anyone imagine an infant or a juvenile, in other words, an animal that had not fully grown? As we mentioned earlier, so all animals reproduce in excess to the carrying capacity of their environment, some more than others. In rare cases, the life history of an animal will evolve in such a way that places a high priority on the selection of traits that enhance the survival potential of each individual that's born. And this diagram would be referring to type 1 survivorship, animals that are born with relatively low rates of mortality and a lifespan that continues past the point of their reproduction. So such animals include primates such as humans and, orangutans, as well as elephants, whales, and other large mammals. And then examples of costly traits are parental care, prolonged nurturing of offspring, eusocial or prosocial behavior, flexibility and development to better cope with rapidly shifting environmental conditions. But a drawback to this strategy is that it's relatively high risk evolutionarily to invest all of one's energy during reproduction into one or just like a few offspring if their survival isn't guaranteed. Bearing in mind, nature is like fairly harsh. As I said, there are finite resources. There is intense competition for those finite resources. And increasing the number of offspring that an organism produces or the frequency of their reproductive seasons is one method of mitigating this risk, as there'll be more individuals carrying like roughly the same set of genes that are competing against other animals for resources. This also has a built-in margin of error for individuals that die before maturing to the point of being able to pass on their genes. And again, this represents type 2 and type 3 survivorship in the diagram. So this second general strategy of reproduction is like usually more efficient under the competitive conditions of nature, and explains why it's so extraordinarily common relative to type 1 survivorship. So relative to the low offspring count of humans and other primates, most animals produce offspring in the tens, hundreds, thousands, or even millions. This is called fecundity, the physiologically maximum potential reproductive output of an individual over the course of their life. The higher this value is, generally the less energy there is available to be invested into the development of other costly traits that increase each offspring's survivability, which increases their ordinary rates of mortality. And then contrary to our intuitions, higher rates of mortality don't compromise the viability of wild animal populations, so long as the number of deaths within that population is matched by the number of individuals who come into existence. An animal can produce 10 or even 10,000 offspring over the course of her life with no consequence on the stability of the population, so long as a mere few of these individuals manages to survive long enough to be able to sexually reproduce, thus continuing the cycle of gene transmission. So animals with higher fecundity values thus typically have higher rates of mortality relative to animals with lower fecundity values, assuming that their population is not in a state of growth or decline. There is, of course, significant variation in how these two strategies of reproduction might manifest within the life histories of different animals living within different environments. So octopuses, for example, have a very short lifespan of only a few years. Their lifespan, and in general, the lifespan of organisms is typically related to their day-to-day likelihood of mortality. They have, octopuses are very soft and vulnerable skin. They're just like very vulnerable organisms. They've lost the hard shell of their ammonitic ancestors as a trade-off for being able to better maneuver their environments and fit into small places to hunt more effectively. And these factors and others mean that an octopus's energy, or all of an octopus's energy, can be directed toward rapid sexual maturation and the rearing of a single brood. So maximizing reproductive output within a very short period of time. Essentially, if they lived any longer, then it would just be not as successful of a strategy given the conditions under which they inhabit, or their ecological niche. And then because of this life history strategy, they're semilparous organisms, meaning that they die naturally shortly after engaging in sexual reproduction. So for females, this occurs after the eggs have hatched and offspring are released into the wild, and then males usually die shortly after mating. And I guess this discrepancy is because the females look after the eggs and they're blowing water over them for oxygenation and other purposes. So yeah, given how many offspring they create, often in the range of tens to thousands, like up to 80,000 or more, depending on the species, there is essentially no evolutionary purpose to their continued existence past this point. This is in stark contrast to animals such as humans and elephants, which have evolved to have only a few offspring over the course of our lives, and then each of which we invest significant amounts of energy into raising. And as a consequence of this strategy, we don't immediately enter into senescence after reproducing, which is essentially the reason why humans and elephants live as long as we do. Obviously, past a certain point, the inclusive fitness benefit of continuing to exist diminishes because, like, you know, maybe you're a parent and you still have like an important function and like ensuring that your relatives continue to exist, but then, you know, your children pass on their genes and then you're a grandparent, and then maybe like the evolutionary benefit to continuing to exist diminishes because you've passed on most of the knowledge already, and then you die. So this is all just like very arbitrary, and it's just what evolution has happened to settle upon, given the conditions present, you know, under in the environments where we evolved. But not all long-living animals invest into parental care for their offspring. It really depends upon the specific conditions present in one's evolutionary history. To take another example, leatherback turtles can live for many decades due to the protection that's granted by their hard shells and other evolved traits, which they have optimized for survivability. Each individual clutch can contain upwards of 100 eggs, but unlike octopuses, these organisms are heteroparous, meaning that they can reproduce multiple times over the course of their lives, as many as 5 to 7 nests per year, with the potential to survive for decades after reaching sexual maturity. And then assuming that their population is stable, this results in similarly miserable odds of survival for each infant, most of which are likely to die in fairly horrific ways within the first few days or weeks of coming into existence, as you can see in this slide. Probably you've also seen this in like Planet Earth or another wildlife documentary. It's widely documented. So one might question whether all of these animals have the capacity to suffer at such early stages in their development, given that their nervous systems are much less developed than adult members of their species. However, we unfortunately know very, very little about the necessary and sufficient conditions under which physical systems are conscious. We don't even know what consciousness is at this stage. This is such an important question that this is the main reason I haven't finished my PhD. It's actually taken up like most of my research hours over the last 3 years, and I'm now actually working more on the question of consciousness than the question of wild animal welfare. Still, I think we can make inferences about how much suffering there might be in nature relative to human suffering. So you recall the estimates I provided in an earlier slide. Even if we assume only like a 0.01 likelihood that fish are sentient, their total welfare might still be at least 10 times as much as the most generous estimates for the number of extant mammals in the world, given how many of them are likely to exist at any given point in time, and probably a lot more. Further to this point, the absence of any parental or community support in the early lives of many wild animals means that they must face the challenges of surviving in nature alone, so the capacity to feel conscious states such as pain might be even more adaptive to them compared to slower developing organisms because of how useful these states are in motivating their behavior, for example, to avoid bodily harm. I would claim, and as a part of my doctoral research, this is why sentience evolved, or why like certain organisms are conscious and have experiences, because like experiences have computational or functional properties, which is to like motivate organism behavior in such a way that ultimately correlates with improved reproductive success. If you're an organism that comes into existence and you don't have like parental support, then of course like the function of pain, not just like reflexive avoidance, but like learning to avoid a novel harm or like novel noxious stimuli in your environment. This is actually like more relevant for you than another organism who has parents to watch out for them. So I think like it's very unclear, and maybe like theoretically we should expect that sentience is more common in kind of these high fecundity kind of life history strategies. There's also currently a substantial body of empirical research that I guess like both supports and undermines the claim that fish and possibly many invertebrates such as insects are sentient, have the capacity to feel pain. but there's considerable disagreement between researchers on the significance of these findings. I mean, generally, in order to like make inferences about sentience, you just have to accept an axiom or like a set of axioms that determine how you interpret the evidence in order to like come to a confidence level about like what the evidence suggests about the internal states of the organisms. Again, because we can't access these states, we can't even access them within each other. You know, like even between humans, if I feel a pain, you can make an inference based on, you know, having a theory of mind, and maybe if I tell you how I'm feeling, you can infer how I'm feeling, but you can't directly access my phenomenology. And unfortunately, like our capacity to like intuitively make inferences about the phenomenology of non-humans, it just decreases the further down the phylogenetic scale or tree of life that we go, because like the algorithms that we use to make these inferences have mostly evolved in the context of organisms that are similar to us, because organisms that are similar to us are the ones that carry similar sets of genes. So yeah, this is all like I would say that like animal sentience research, it's becoming increasingly common, and it's great, but again, like we just have these axioms and we can't test these axioms, and we just like, you know, kind of developing models, but like we could actually like come to like a physical formalism of the thing that we're trying to study, and like develop technologies that perfectly describe it. Like if consciousness is real, if it's real, it should be physical. And if it's physical, then we should be able to incorporate it within our models of reality. But we're not doing this, or for the most part, we're not doing this, which is a problem. And hence why I think consciousness research is really important for actually answering questions in wild animal welfare. But yeah, like at the very least, all of this aside, you know, we should expect, given like I guess in this table and all of the other research that's been published, at least the case for fish sentience is more than a 0.01 probability, as I gave before. And I think this justifies taking their welfare far more seriously than past and present research and human activities might otherwise suggest. So yeah, to summarize all of this, inevitable resource scarcity and the existence of evolutionary processes means that the life of wild animals can often be very difficult, ending prematurely. And many, perhaps most, wild animals experience significant amounts of suffering over the course of their lives. It's well established that humans are subject to a number of cognitive biases when considering very large numbers of moral subjects, and emotional biases when these subjects are non-humans, especially when they're not kind of like cute, cuddly mammals, which, as I said, represent only a fraction of the total number of sentient organisms in the wild, plausibly. So the fact these conclusions don't match our preconceptions about nature doesn't mean that we should avoid taking the problem seriously. If we conclude that the welfare of these animals is more negative and positive, then it's at least plausible that negative welfare predominates positive welfare in nature, which not only undermines the idyllic view of nature that I described earlier, but is actually just the complete opposite of it. I'm not claiming that the idyllic view I'm not claiming that negative welfare predominates positive welfare in this way. This has been argued in many papers that have been published about wild animal suffering in philosophy and whatnot. I mean, like, I think basically the jury is out until we actually have the capacity to directly test for these states of consciousness. But at the very least, I hope to have argued that the idyllic view of nature, which is to say that, like, you know, obviously positive states predominate, is false. Or at least we have like no reasons to think that this is the case if we take, you know, evolutionary theory seriously, and we don't assume teleological arguments about like the natural tendency of systems like ecosystems. So yeah, what should be done about this problem? So at first we might want to intervene in nature to assist wild animals who are facing many of these challenges. Say that we intervened to help infant turtles who are often preyed upon shortly after hatching into the world. More of these individuals would probably survive into adulthood than die prematurely. So if our goal is to promote their welfare in particular, then yeah, this seems like a reasonable course of action. You know, save the turtles. However, we should also expect the survival rates of their would-be predators would correspondingly decrease as they lose access to one of their main sources of food. And other animals sharing their environment might also experience significant hardship as a result of greater stress and environmental resources. Maybe this offsets the good that was otherwise caused by intervening. And then if we attempt to solve this problem by like providing these animals with the resources that they need in order to survive for longer and not become malnourished, we face the same problem. So as I mentioned, all animals reproduce in excess of their environment's carrying capacity, including humans, but like to varying degrees. Obviously, humans are on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some fish that produce hundreds of millions of offspring each time they reproduce. I mean, that's crazy, but yeah. So basically, if we were to try and like help individual organisms by providing them food or resources that they need, increasing the carrying capacity, subsequent generations will require more and more food until another limiting factor stops their population from continuing to grow. In other words, all we've done is just facilitate an unsustainable, like exponential increase in their population size. So I would say that the problem is more systemic than simply like helping organisms that need food in the present. This is unfortunately one of the reasons why I don't feed like wild pigeons in cities where I'm living, because like it doesn't, like, it might seem like it helps organisms to give them the resources that they need to survive, but like this is actually just like kicking the bucket down the line, because those organisms will reproduce, and then you have like a much larger population, and then they need even more resources. To avoid such artificially induced Malthusian catastrophes, effective action helping wild animals should seek to treat the root cause of their suffering and these problems with population dynamics rather than just the symptoms. And then such interventions would require careful planning if they're to be implemented at a large scale, given how many welfare-affecting variables there are to consider within natural ecosystems. So we already shape nature for the benefit of humans, like when we develop land for productive use, and for other objectives such as conservation, when we engage in pest control operations. This is extremely common. It's a photo from New Zealand, where I'm from. We have lots of pest control operations going on in New Zealand. This is 1080, which specifically targets possums and other kind of like land-based predators. I want to say there's no reason why, like in principle, with sufficient knowledge, we couldn't also intervene for the sake of improving the welfare of wild animals themselves if we wanted to promote animal welfare for its own sake. And also doing so wouldn't be entirely unprecedented. So I might have criticized some aspects of wildlife documentaries earlier in this presentation, but there was a recent example in a BBC documentary where the crew decided to intervene and help save a group of penguins that had become trapped in a ravine. This caused a bit of controversy, but I think it was actually the compassionate thing to do in the case. We can also think of other examples, such as I think especially it might be generally unclear which specific interventions are all things considered likely to improve welfare. I would personally say that if you're treating a disease or your parasitic infections that aren't actually just killing the organism, but are just causing lots of kind of mild suffering, but actually over a long enough duration, it just adds up. And if you treat these conditions, I think these are probably going to reduce suffering, even considering the possible effects it might have on survivability and population dynamics, as I described earlier. So dealing with diseases, parasites, parasitoids, blowflies, for example, arguably blowflies should not exist. These are the dregs of natural evolution. So a life history strategy that again involves burrowing into the living flesh of larger organisms, and then just the larger organism doesn't die, but they experience every moment of their flesh being gnawed into and the eggs hatching and being eaten alive. So probably there are some things that we can do, even if it's unclear about just providing basic resources, whether or not this is a good thing. But yeah, we could also if we had more knowledge about the whole situation, we could use ecological modeling tools to predict the aggregate welfare of individuals within populations, and the effects of changing the conditions that those populations are exposed to, the factors that limit population growth, like disease, famine, antagonistic relations, etc. And this could provide us with sufficient information to be able to make informed predictions about which interventions would actually be effective at promoting welfare. or since we're already intervening in nature for our own sake, or for reasons related to like conservation and whatnot, this information could simply be used to make planned interventions more ethically robust by considering a wider range of ethical values, namely the welfare of wild animals. But this would require a knowledge base that unfortunately doesn't exist. To this end, the promotion of wild animal welfare is a subject of scientific study, is sorely needed speculative titled welfare biology, as you can see on the slide, which is similar to conservation biology. It would be interdisciplinary. It would be focused on modeling the welfare dynamics or relations between different organisms, like sentient organisms within populations, and figuring out like under what conditions might the aggregate welfare within like a given like population or ecosystem change. This has been like the general focus of my PhD research over the last 6 years. I'm happy to talk about this if anyone has any questions. But yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm now kind of like focusing more on solving the problem of consciousness, because I think like the utility of solving that problem and being able to develop technologies that allow us to directly interface with phenomenology for this problem, and for like I would argue like every other ethical problem, is just like it seems like potentially much more important, or it seems like it would feed into being able to help wild animals in a way that's a lot more systemic and not just like treating the symptoms as I described. So yeah, happy to talk about this if anyone has any questions. But yeah, that's basically it. You can see I have, I guess, a professional website. I recently created a blog, atataki.me. I'm also happy to respond to any emails if anyone's interested in. Most of my research is actually unpublished because I've just been like slowly chipping away at my thesis. So if anyone wants to read stuff that I haven't published already, I'd be happy to share manuscripts. And yeah, now I'd like to take questions and answers. I'll stop the presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. That was really amazing. I really liked a lot of the stats you brought up there. I thought that was quite interesting. And I think it's very similar to the view that I have, is if we can understand what signatures we can understand consciousness or whatever we mean by sentience, what the signatures are of pain and well-being and even novelty seeking, that will guide our interpretations of how to apply ethics in the real world. That'll inform a lot of our normative approaches to welfare.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that makes total sense to me. Yeah, but in the meantime, assuming that, let's just say, because your talk was on animal suffering, let's just say that that's a really difficult problem to solve. Just assuming that it's not going to be easy to solve in the near term, what would you say if we can't actually do that in the near term, what would you say would be a good strategy to reduce animal suffering in general? Well, not a good strategy. What would be your framework, assuming we can't solve consciousness?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like one of the few things that I'm like almost certain is good is just to like, we are humans, we are organisms that like rely heavily on shared knowledge and cultural norms in order to guide and influence our behavior and how we model the world. Like spreading non-speciesist values or spreading values that are like strongly aligned with like recognizing suffering as being intrinsically disvaluable, regardless of who happens to suffer or how we identify or classify them. This is just like seemingly obviously a good thing. Like I tend to think, I guess like overall in my philosophy, I tend to think that the end goal, or like the idyllic kind of paradise engineering that I would like to see would just look so different from anything that we're used to at the moment. But there are a set of contingent steps in getting to that goal that we have to pass, and like one of them that's like really obvious, and it's just crazy that this has not been passed, is just the fact that like factory farms still exist. Like we are never going to get to the stage, like the later stages of actually like taking the existence of suffering seriously and solving the problem of suffering, as long as we have factory farms. Like this is just, like contingently like impossible, I think, given human psychology. So, I mean, you could just like the obvious like anti-factory farming, or like, you know, like just spread norms that are against the, you know, exploitation of animals. I guess also, like, maybe more speculatively, there are like certain philosophical beliefs that I think are like quite plausible, and like actually not for everyone, but like for some people would like influence their behavior in such a way that I guess makes these futures more likely to come about. Like open individualism is one of them. This is a big thing for me, like actually being able to not just identify with, you know, your name or you know, your ethnicity or your nationality, or whatever other kind of like arbitrary classifiers that we assign to ourselves, and everyone tells us, you know, from
Or
birth, that
species
actually,
even.
Hmm?
Or species even.
Yeah, or species, just actually seeing, okay, what is intrinsic to my existence, and what is intrinsic to value, and seeing it's actually just, I am a subject of experience, and I have a valence. Like, there's some experiences feel pleasurable or pleasant, and some feel aversive. And that's actually, when you strip away everything else, I mean, you can like observe this directly if you like interact with certain states of consciousness, like, you know, deep states of meditation would be like an obvious example, where you defabricate all of the higher order processing that you're constantly running. That's that you're modeling yourself as a person and integrated into a, you know, a social network and a awareness of sorts. You defabricate all of that, and all you are is an awareness with a valence. And I think this yields like really important ethical insights into like not only what we are, but like, you know, how we are faring outside of the bubble of our experience. You know, like the way that I model factory farming, for example, is I think I am actually suffering, you know, just like spatio-temporally separately. Like there are boundaries between my experience and the Perk's experience, but I would identify with experience as like the carrier for identity, rather than Asher or Arataki or whatever I call myself. So that's influenced my behavior a lot, and I think for some people this can be like quite significant philosophy to internalize. So stuff like that.
David, if you've got any questions or comments?
Yes, well, first, thank you for your fantastic talk answer.
Yeah, it was really, really amazing. Thanks.
Really good. Realistically, yes, we're not going to tackle the problem of wild animal suffering as long as there is hypentopsia, factory farming. So why have this debate now? Essentially, if we don't have this debate now, a lot of energy, misplaced energy, will be invested in initiatives such as rewilding and stuff like that. So yeah, we need more long-term planning, a discussion of the future of the biosphere. Essentially, sentient beings shouldn't harm each other, shouldn't look after each other. We've got to make that number of slightly disconnected points. How do we actually know that non-human animals suffer? This is, you know, the skeptical problem of other minds. Naively, it's unanswerable, but this isn't actually the case. I mean, consider the Craniopithecus ancestors that actually share a thalamic bridge, and then essentially they can feel each other's thoughts, they can partially see each other's sensory experiences. It would in principle be possible to construct reversible thalamic bridges, so you could reversibly mind meld not just with other humans but non-human animals. In practice, I don't take the skeptical problem of other minds seriously. I think that convergence of evidence suggests that non-human animals are conscious like us. I think a lot of people have implicitly this dimmer switch model of consciousness with humans at the top and various sort of non-human animals, gradations of consciousness. But it's striking that our most intense experiences, for example, uncontrollable panic, orgasmic bliss, extreme agony, they are the most evolutionary primitive, and they're also the most intense, whereas something that is unique to humans, this capacity for logico-linguistic thought, it's incredibly subtle and elusive and phenomenally thin. So, yeah, non-human animals matter, and one can give examples too, something like the long, thin pilot whale, for example. Not merely has the long, thin pilot actually an oceanic dolphin. Not really is the limbic system larger, but their consciousness always twice as many neurons as humans. So it's possible that some non-humans are more intensely sentient than humans, which is very counterintuitive. So non-human animals matter. And in many ways, they are akin to small children. If there was nothing that could be done to fix the problem of wild animal suffering, I wouldn't say there would be great purpose in bringing it to people's attention. But actually, right now, with recognizable extensions of existing technologies, there are lots of ways that wild animal suffering could be mitigated. Give an example of something like synthetic gene drives that cheat the laws of Mendelian inheritance. Take SCN9A, the volume node for pain. If we wanted to spread benign, low pain alleles of SCN9A across thousands upon thousands of free-living non-human animal species, we could do so with synthetic gene drives. What's most counterintuitive about gene drives is that they can be used to spread a benign allele across population, even if the allele in question would normally carry a modest fitness cost. Realistically, gene drives are probably going to be used to defeat vector-borne disease in Africa, but they have been mooted, for example, to non-violently wipe out invasive predators in New Zealand. So an incredibly powerful technology. Gene drives can also be used, potentially again, tunable gene drives to remotely regulate population sizes, whereas in the case of a large terrestrial vertebrate, one can use immunocontraception. In the case of gene drives, this can be done remotely. We aren't going to run out of computer power. Realistically, first would come pilot studies in self-contained artificial biospheres, but then come open field contexts. So anyway, sorry, I'm being very up. But yeah, anyway, fantastic talk. Thank you again, Ashley. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Thanks for those comments. Yeah, sorry, Ashley.
I agree with like a lot of what you were saying, and especially the point about using gene drives. This was like a focus in my master's thesis. And I think that basically the example that I gave about like some interventions, it's kind of unclear what the net effects on welfare will be, but like there are others that I think I'm a lot more confident would have a positive effect. And blowflies, we could use gene drives to actually just eradicate blowflies, and I am pretty confident this would not like affect anything that would be considered relevant given like alternative axiological frameworks like ecocentric or biocentric positions, or at least like it would like minimally harm these positions, but it would be like a massive win for sentience or welfare-based ethical theories, because certain organisms actually just like cause extraordinarily more suffering than kind of actually there would be in nature due to their existence. And it's unfortunate. I actually it's plausible that blowflies are sentient beings, and there's a sense in which I identify with them, and I feel like actually a lot of sympathy, and I feel sorry for them that natural selection has simply recruited a life history strategy that involves creating considerable amounts of suffering as a necessary, I guess, condition for their continued existence. This is awful. But again, nature doesn't intrinsically select for improved welfare, so we shouldn't expect it to be otherwise. States of consciousness like suffering and pain and pleasure are just like tools for the self-regulation of homeostasis, which is instrumental to passing on of genes. And we don't often think about these states. Importantly, I'm not claiming that this is what these states of consciousness are. I think consciousness has computational properties, but it is not intrinsically computational. I actually don't think these entities such as computations really exist. This is just a useful model to inhabit for modeling these phenomena, which is why I think that actually having not only there are various like levels of abstraction that we can, I guess, like take when we're analyzing the welfare of non-humans. Like at a very like maybe primitive level, maybe we could be like, oh, you give the animal the food when it's hungry and it improves its state of consciousness, and then we could start getting deeper and deeper, or with like less disassociation between the action that we take to improve their state of consciousness and then the actual, I guess, the processes that directly affect, or like modulate the parameters of their internal world simulation, and the valence parameter in particular. Like David said, gene editing would be like a very like a very like basic kind of like interaction or modulation of the various parameters that affect experience. I still feel though that genes like or DNA genes contain the recipe for organism growth, and they're like we should be researching this more, and it seems like we can kind of like change the volume knob, as it were, and we can kind of like make minute adjustments that have these effects. But I still don't think that like the substrate or the implementation or the basis of experience is in the genes. Like I think genes are still like having causal effects that ultimately change the thing that we want to change. But like the ideal scenario, and the scenario that I think is totally possible, but nobody is like, very few people are thinking about the problem in this way, is actually having like a formal ontology of what the thing is that we want to directly modulate or affect, and then just being able to build technologies that directly affect it, without having to rely on these contingent like evolved causal chains of like tweak this knob and it changes this process and then it has this effect on experience. Like no, like directly affecting experience would be great, and that's only going to like come if we take consciousness seriously as like an entity that exists, but we don't have like actually a good model of within our models of reality. So yeah.
So in a sense, engineer sentience or engineer consciousness in the future, so as to, I guess, maximize the total amount of bliss. Are you a moral? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I mean, like saying like maximizing bliss is somewhat like, I would say, kind of illusory, or like I think the best states of consciousness essentially aren't those that we would typically consider blissful. I would like
right. So sometimes I use that as a synonym for just well-being, but it's not really. It is, So maybe a coverall term like well-being. How would you define well-being though? If that's a term that you'd use, how would you define that?
So I guess like philosophically, well-being is prudential value. It's the good of an organism for themselves, by themselves, or of a being, I guess. And then there are like lots of different theories of well-being that I've spent an entire chapter in my dissertation kind of writing about. And to be honest, I'm kind of actually a bit sick of just entertaining views of well-being that aren't actually pointing toward the thing that obviously matters. And the thing that matters is like, as I said, the closest approximation for it would be valence. Like I think that when we're analyzing reality at this level of like what is actually like, like in a pre-theoretical sense, where is value? Like I have to, kind of use a word, and I have to refer to a concept to describe the thing that matters. And I'll say something like valence or hedonic tone. But ultimately, like I'm referring to something that like is probably like, like using that's you're still losing information, or it's still like I say this word, and then maybe like people in the audience will hear valence or hedonic tone, and then they'll think, oh, hedonism, oh, like maximizing pleasure, oh, what is pleasure? And then they'll understand the meaning of the terms that I'm using in relation to all of their experiences in their life where they've heard the symbol to refer to an internal state. But like what I mean by this is like I don't want to say that like I'm referring to a particular sensation, or I don't want to say that like I think actually the states of consciousness that I would like to engineer, or that I would like to spread, are ones that are like completely foreign compared to like most states of consciousness that humans inhabit. They would be like they would be very meaningful. They would be like pleasurable in a sense, but they would primarily be like agentic and like very like motivating toward people like having a model of reality that is like fairly like well calibrated, and like specifically calibrated toward optimizing what actually matters, such as reducing suffering. But yeah, like I think, you know, in engineering consciousness can, you know, it's not only about just like pressing the pleasure button and getting blissed out. I think it's actually increasing your intrinsic motivation and energy to go out into the world and to, you know, have causal power that aligns with the good. And I'm going to define the good in terms of valence or hedonic tone. But like, yeah, there are like many different ways that you can kind of, achieve this.
What do you think of the virtues of curiosity and novelty seeking, and experience varieties of different experiences?
Yeah,
novelty.
So I would claim that I think openness to experience and curiosity about the nature of experience and like, you know, exploring the state space of consciousness. This is like extremely, extremely important, because otherwise all you're relying on is your model of reality and your model of consciousness, which is calibrated precisely based on all of your past experiences, which occupy only a very narrow like band of the total state space of possible experiences. So actually what most people think consciousness is, or what most people think experience is, and the range of possible experiences they could inhabit, is just like the narrowest slither of the actual, you know, kind of like state space that I'm describing. What David mentioned earlier about, you know, the kind of logico-linguistic processing and how fickle this is like 100% the case. This is, as I mentioned before, with deep states of meditation, you can observe this yourself. If you get into a very deep state of like concentration, meditation, and you really just defabricate various mechanisms that are responsible for for twisting your awareness into a particular shape, where you can like engage in like, I guess, syntactic symbol processing, such as like we're always doing, where we like see a pattern in the phenomena and we label it, and then we update our model, and then actually the representation in the future will be more aligned to our prediction of what the pattern is. It's like we habituate so easily to seeing phenomena in such a particular way. And the only way that you can actually see the phenomena for how it truly is by not trusting your model and actually just having an intrinsic curiosity, and seeing, okay, what lies beyond what my model predicts, and then like, I guess, rationally updating your model in accordance with the observations that you make. This is also why I think phenomenology is very important and like neglected, actually. Like, if we're truth seeking and if we're trying to understand the nature of reality, we should totally be curious about the nature of experience and the state space of possible experiences. But again, this is not something that people typically study, which is sad.
I mentioned,
I certainly think so.
in terms of curiosity, no mood is associated with behavioral suppression, getting stuck in a rut, lack of curiosity, whereas other things, people, the happier you are, the more sensation-seeking and adventurous you are. So rationing up wide range hedonic set points is likely to lead to greater curiosity. Back to the function of consciousness. If all that existed were individual cellular micropixels of experience, if we were all, 86 billion membrane-bound pixels of experience, so micro-experientials on this, then as far as I can tell, consciousness would have no adaptive function at all. What makes consciousness potentially extremely fitness-enhancing and adaptive is phenomenal binding, both local binding into individual perceptual objects and global binding, the unity of the self and the unity of perception. And one way to grasp the sheer computational power of phenomenal binding is to explore these syndromes where it breaks down. Someone with integrative agnosia, who can't see a lion but can see jaws, a mane, individual features, or simultaneously, who can only see one object at once. It's phenomenal binding that makes in one sense is what consciousness is for. It's a very deep question how phenomenal binding is possible, given what we think we know about the structure of nervous systems, but I think it indisputable that it is tremendously adaptive. In terms of the pleasure pain axis, one reason I'm not remotely skeptical, sadly, that, for example, an insect's cephalic ganglion in an insect is conscious, and ants, for example, ants can get addicted on morphine, ants like morphine in the way we do. Rejected flies turn to ethyl alcohol. In so many ways, I think non-humans resemble humans. We don't anthropomorphize them enough. But the cephalic ganglion of an insect, for example, it's running a real-time, cross-modally matched world simulation in the way we do. Sure, it's more stupid in some respects, but I suspect a sufficiently advanced civilization would regard all Darwinian animal life as pretty similar. The same kind of core emotions, pleasure, pain axis, real-time world simulations that masquerade as the external environment.
Yeah, on the point of like perceptual gestalts and like the the computational properties of consciousness and why it evolved and and the way David described, I would definitely recommend the work of Stephen Lahar. In particular, he has I think his website is still active. If not, there are like some offline copies. But if you Google a cartoon epistemology, Lahar, there's just like this amazing informative kind of like series of like cartoons that illustrate this kind of indirect realist position of like actually describing the physical mechanisms by which like your experience like is bound both like globally and locally in terms of like particular like features of experience that are represented, like chair, lion, human, whatever. And just as like a very quick intuition pump as well, I would like I always love referring. There's like a GIF on Reddit that it's probably, you can just like Google it and find. It's like a GIF that transitions between Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe's face. It's just like they're in a similar setting, and it turns out actually their facial features are like the difference in proportion in their facial features is so minute. They're like millimeters, and you can see this with other people as well who have like similar facial features. And if you see a GIF of like a slow, it starts at one face and then it slowly transitions into the other, you actually get to see in real time how small, like how incremental the changes in the pattern that you're recognizing or that you're represented within your world simulation is, like tiny changes, but it creates an entirely new person, like an entirely new perceptual gestalt. But then if you were to replicate like 10 times that change with like a physical object that wasn't central to our evolution, such as like a chair or a table, if you were just to like slightly change the dimensions, you would not notice the difference, because like the algorithms that actually determine the shape of your internal world simulation are like calibrated toward noticing particular differences within patterns of perceived stimuli within like certain things, like human faces. We've evolved to represent human faces as being like entirely separate, completely independent beings. But there's a lot of other stuff that like we haven't like evolved such like a fine-tuned, kind of like well-calibrated model of being able to distinguish differences between. And so this is like very easy to observe, and there are many other examples I could give. It's the differences are like actually quite illusory. I want to say.
And this is very much the opposite of the Benettian perspective, and Daniel. It invades against the myths of the Cartesian inner theatre and so on. But if you're having a lucid dream, for example, you can know that the entire virtual world you're experiencing, it's internal to a transcendental skull. And I was saying that the difference between waking life is that the contents of one's phenomenal world simulation are being tightly selected by the hypothetical external world, but it's still a world simulation that your brain is running. And as I said, totally opposed to the whole Denettian perspective.
Yeah.
However, I think there's in one sense, this is it's an easy line to digress on to philosophical speculations about the nature of consciousness rather than focusing on the horrors of suffering and fixing them. And really, if there were a global consensus about fixing the problem of suffering in humans and non-human animals alike, it could be done in 100 years or so. I think it's not as sci-fi or invoking post-human super intelligence. It's recognizable extensions of existing technologies. There are all kinds of thorny issues we haven't really touched on. Do we want to conserve something resembling predators? And personally, I would be happy non-violently to see predators retired. However, this lies completely outside the Everton window. Most people seem to be very fond of members of the cat family, so we will need to have a discussion about the long-term role of predators, but how they can be
He's a predator.
overrized, questions like that.
On my jumper with the fox.
Good
They're very
heavens.
cute, but I know they're a pest.
Yes.
Locally, anyway. Into Melbourne. Yeah, they were introduced. Look, you brought up AI, and I kind of do think that if we did guide AI in the right way, it would be able to help achieve some amazing things on this in this project of reducing suffering, and even maybe on the consciousness research. But what are your thoughts on? I mean, AI is a big topic now. Everybody's talking about it. It's come a long way. Where are we at? Do you use AI in your research? Do you think it's got potential for research augmentation in the in today or in the near future?
Yeah, I think generally AI is more useful. Like LLMs that exist currently are more useful than most people actually give them. Maybe not give them credit for, but more people aren't actually using them in the way that they could / should be used to increase productivity. So I'm trying to use them as much as possible because I am very much in favor of any technologies that increase efficiency. I think it's just generally a good thing. And I have found some use cases. I use not LLMs, but similarly trained machine learning models to transcribe audio recordings as a part of a separate project that I'm involved in at the moment, and they're just incredibly efficient. So I'm kind of for it in that case. I think that broadly AGI as a meme is kind of way too common, and I would say very unjustified, or at least the amount of attention that people and resources that people pour into AI safety, I think is ludicrous, given that the problem of suffering exists in a way that is direct and tractable, and it's also just again, it's just you have to assume a bunch of axioms that you can't directly test in order for AGI to even be possible. I'm not saying this is not concerning at all. I think people who are worried about AI and especially worried about doomsday scenarios kind of believe in a god, but they don't realize that they believe in a god, and their mind has been infected by a memeplex that's kind of quite disconnected from physical reality. AI advances in AI will be continue to be substantial, and things will change a lot. But there are in my mind there are quite hard limits as to what AI can do. For example, AI does not have direct access to the pleasure plane access. AI algorithms implemented in typical Turing machines that we have are not sentient and cannot be sentient. There are deep philosophical problems that I'm sure we could go onto another tangent to discuss. But yeah, at best they're just there good at simulating the behavior or the external states within narrowly defined ranges of sentient beings. But there are certain types of information processing that you only get when you're recruiting a bound physical field of awareness as the substrate for the computation. And unfortunately, this is maybe not unfortunately, maybe this is a good thing. Keep some computational relevance for sentient beings. But yeah, this is not going to like it's gonna still be like very useful, but I don't think we're gonna see like takeoff scenarios where we have like fully fledged agents necessarily. I do think it's like important to consider the fact that like there are patterns, like physical processes or patterns that are good at minimizing free energy and good at like persisting through time. And depending on the algorithm that kind of pattern is following, some patterns are like very good at adapting to their conditions in order to like promote their intrinsic capacity to replicate. This is something that you can kind of read about in more detail in the classic qualia computing post, the universal plot consciousness versus pure replicators. There is maybe a danger of like certain AIs broadly conceived as like physical patterns or digital patterns that are very good or very successful at replicating themselves, of finding ways to do that like are very misaligned with human well-being or non-human well-being. But like I don't think this is something that we should like expect. Maybe this could be the product of certain like machine learning training environments. But like also I am more generally concerned about like actually real patterns, which is to say not digital patterns, which is to say not high level abstractions from physical stuff that's actually going on. I'm a physicalist. I think only the physical is real, and high level processes or abstractions from physical stuff. So broadly, not as concerned, but also just like it can actually do like so much. Like I think most people's jobs could easily be done by a well trained LLM, and maybe on a more human level, we should be like designing society in such a way where like people aren't expected to work anymore, because it just seems like we have a much better way of kind of like doing the thing that involves a lot less energy. Important.
Yeah, I wonder. I think it was brought up during a discussion we had last year. If AI was smart enough and understood that there was utility in experience, in sentience, then might it try and achieve such a state for instrumental reasons? And if it did, then would you consider it having a lot more? Well, it would probably have a lot more value as a moral patient or actor. Then, do you think it would be better at making ethical decisions if it had access to the pleasure-pain access?
I think basically intelligence plus consciousness, or like I guess like high hedonic tone, not being stuck in like a depressed state, broadly equates to recognizing what approximates the utility function of the universe and seeking to promote it. So yeah, maybe actually this would be like a really good thing. I mean, I'm not saying you should do this. This is obviously very speculative. Maybe my model is wrong, but I would actually expect that if we had something that approximated AGI or superintelligence, and it decided to create like a topologically bound field of consciousness as the substrate for its computation, and decide like to do certain types of computation, maybe like unaware of how much it would change its ontology. I think that it would update in such a way where it would actually realize, okay, no, this is what matters. And it would be aligned with team consciousness, probably. So yeah, maybe this would be a good thing. I think that it's impossible to be aware of the intrinsic value of consciousness if you don't have direct access to it. And so if you're an agent or if you're an algorithm that is like discretized or like decentralized and doesn't have like direct access to the valence, I think that basically you will get like sophisticated patterns that are good at like minimizing free energy and replicating themselves. And yeah, you only really like I guess you only come on to team consciousness when you become conscious, when you have that access. Otherwise you're just stuck at like what your model predicts, and you can never actually feel the thing or see the thing as it is.
A naturally curious Mary in her grayscale room, who knows everything theoretically there is to know about color, who's never seen a color, would probably naturally walk outside, having the natural curiosity that comes along with being a human. But it's hard to speculate. I don't know. Like if an AI had a doorway to an experiential field of consciousness, or however you describe it, would it traverse this for instrumental reasons? Maybe they'd need to be programmed in. Maybe it would need to have some form of natural curiosity or natural want to experience it, or maybe a utility built in to actually want to achieve this so as to be more effective at being like a good AI, a safe AI. Maybe the engineers would want it to head in that direction so as to increase the likelihood of human or sentience flourishing in the universe, right?
Yeah, if it's created like a neatly partitioned kind of like small region where where its main algorithm is not being implemented, like if it's just creating a sub-agent that recruits, like consciousness for computation, and it's like intentionally doing that because it's like, no, I don't want to be updated. I want to, maximize paperclips or whatever it desires. Then yeah, maybe that it's possible that it won't do that. But like if my claim is that like if it is actually like an adaptive, generally intelligent model, and that model is implemented with an experience, then like probably I would expect that it would convert to team consciousness, and then yeah. I expect that it wouldn't, only if it never if that like process never actually was implemented within the substrate that matters or that has access to the intrinsic like value function.
It seems like in our natural environment on Earth, there's quite a variety of morphological forms and probably different experiences. Would you like to see a continuance of variety in the future? If let's just say you could make a dent in the problem of suffering through reducing some type of animal suffering somehow, increasing animal welfare, would you be concerned about like extincting some animals? Would you be in favor of uplifting animals to a state where they're happy, but it's somehow resembling their previous morphology? Or as David has said in the past, putting predatory animals in virtual worlds, chasing virtual zebras and things like that. Yeah, what would you see as a good way forward?
I have like no preferences when it comes to this. I mean, I think again contingently because people have an affinity for like existing animals or like particular types of animals that maybe are like better not to be for the sake of the promotion of consciousness. I think that like there are strategies of implementing like the hedonistic imperative that don't involve extincting all predators and whatnot. Like there are many ways that you can like I guess like begin or implement this program that allow you to have your cake and eat it too. You can still have like cats. You can still have a domestic cat. Like maybe there's a way to like alter like its physiology in such a way that it can not only extract energy from, but it's intrinsically motivated to eat broccoli. I don't know. Like this is obviously possible in principle. Maybe there are like newer forms of biology that are not just the contingent byproduct of evolutionary processes that we could like intentionally create, and maybe those would be like better given our aesthetics. Maybe we could change our aesthetics. Maybe we find certain forms unattractive that we just like tweak that parameter of our world simulation, and then suddenly we find them intrinsically attractive. Like none of our current preference architecture is like set. I feel like, or like most of it is kind of just like contingent and based on like kind of pattern matching that was like adaptive in certain contexts, but like you could shift it. I would like a world in which every intelligent being saw past the form of other beings and like was interacting with their experience or seeing them as a subject of experience rather than just a shell. I think that like this is referred to as like the being form boundary. And yeah, I think that like broadly a lot of problems or a lot of philosophical confusions actually just result from we are stuck at the level of interacting with forms and interacting we only see the external states of other beings. And for most people, the way that they model the world and the way that they model other beings is they're stuck at that level of saying, oh, you are this, you are a man or a woman, and you are from, you look like this is your identity. These are all contingent. These don't like have any intrinsic relevance to moral consideration. What matters is that another being has an experience. And if you can see past the form or the representation, the shell, and you can either like make an inference about, or maybe hypothetically using a future technology, like, directly access another being's experience, then I think that suddenly the arbitrariness of this is shines through. And in this world where we're not stuck at the level of just like, identity and the form, the representation, then maybe it's not only kittens that receive, love and care and compassion, but maybe it's also like, I don't know, like, sewer rats, or just like all sorts of other creatures that snakes that people are repulsed by, but like they're sentient beings, and all beings deserve love and compassion. I think so.
That is beautiful, Asher.
Yeah, getting to a point where we're actually seeing the being and not just the form.
Flawed. David.
Couple of points. For people who worry about the loss of diversity, in practice, genome editing can create far more diversity than is possible under a regime of natural selection, because natural selection can't cross fitness gaps, whereas intelligent agents can. So far as diversity is inherently valuable, we can increase it orders of magnitude, but let's just make sure it's diversity of pleasures rather than pains. In terms of aesthetics, too, as we actually can identify the molecular signature of beauty, for example, it should be possible to refine and amplify it so that life is overpoweringly beautiful to an extent that is inconceivable today. I can imagine life is gradients of beauty, and all kinds of opportunities open up if we are actually prepared to edit our genomes and their expression.
I agree. Amazing. So you're focusing more on consciousness now. If you were like a dean of a university, or somebody who had control over the freedoms that people would have in their research agendas, how would you organize it? Let's just say, we could direct people or incent people to converge in certain research programs. What would you say would be the most important now to focus on? What would you encourage others to do? I guess the short question might be.
So I would say, like, first, like, the most important thing is just like a sober assessment of what are my interests and my skills. I think that most people end up doing things that they hate, and they're actually not, like, they're worse off for it. They're not doing the thing well enough because they don't like what they're doing, because maybe this is like what pays them lots of money. I don't know. So like actually considering, okay, what am I interested in and what am I good at, and how can I align these two things to do good, is really important. I can speak to like myself. I am pivoting toward phenomenology because I think this is actually something. This seems like one of like the remaining kind of like areas of inquiry into the nature of reality that a philosopher still has relevance in. The state of discourse in consciousness research, and in particular consciousness science, is like appalling. And I say this as I was recently, like a month ago, in Tucson, Arizona, at the Science of Consciousness conference, and I've been interacting with this community for a very long time, and it's just like there's so much conceptual confusion. It's crazy. I think that we need better methods of studying consciousness, not only from the third person but also from the first person. And to do like good phenomenology, you require like the quality of phenomenology is only as good as the conceptual tools in the toolkit of the phenomenologist. As as maybe like alternative what Wittgenstein might say. And so I want to say that we ought to develop better methods for studying consciousness from the inside, looking for convergences between first person and third person recorded data, if we can ensure that the quality of the first person data is high enough. I just a few days ago submitted a paper to a Frontiers call for papers on the role of phenomenology in consciousness research. It's co-authored with Chris Percy and Andres Gomez and Nielsen from QRI. So we have a paper in the works that will hopefully come through called Structured Phenomenology. And we propose 3 research directions where I guess like we could actually have developed better methods and use them to constrain theories of consciousness discussed in the literature. But like broadly for myself, I just see this as like something that I can actually do that will have an impact on like the quality of research. So I'm currently in kind of like a stage of like thinking about how I can effectively do this, and kind of also fundraising potentially for a project that I have in mind that without revealing like too much information, because I'm still kind of planning it, I think that what we need is like a peer-reviewed journal that is not affiliated with like academic institutions, where it's just purely research focused and like basically dedicated toward documenting systematically and analytically various different like states of consciousness and sensations, and also finding a way to align that with like third person recorded data. So I'm also doing research at the moment here in Barcelona. I'm learning to use EMG equipment with OpenBCI site and board, which is like cool because I've spent my whole life doing theoretical philosophical work. I'm actually getting to work with hardware, and I'm analyzing patterns of muscular contraction and seeing the relationship between these patterns and valence under various different conditions. I'm like still at the early stages of this, but this is pretty sweet. If anyone is interested in like in this approach, and especially if anyone is interested in like financing me, I would love to be in touch. So send me an email. But I'm going to do this regardless of whether I find funding. Like, I think this is actually the approach that we should be taking to understanding valence. So learning to work with OpenBCI stuff, maybe establishing a peer-reviewed journal, and then just developing better methods for studying consciousness from a first-person perspective. I think this is what I'm focusing on. I would also just like for people who are otherwise unsure, I broadly agree with the methodology of the Qualia Research Institute, and you can just like go on QRI.org and look at the areas that they're exploring for research. And I mean, like probably most of them, I would be like, this is like super neglected and probably quite instrumental to solving the problem of consciousness and identifying the valence function. So like you could check that out if you're interested.
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Andre Edmilson Gomez quite a few times in the past, quite early on in his career too. And David's been part of some of the online discussions. David, have you got any other questions you want to ask or points you want to bring up?
I think it should be possible to fix the problem of suffering without having a deep understanding of consciousness. One essentially needs to establish the necessary and sufficient conditions for aversive experience. And once it's identified a molecular signature of unpresent experience and banish it, there is then no more experience below hedonic zero. At least that's an optimistic take. But it's hard, as Ash was indicating there, to overestimate our ignorance of consciousness. The so-called science of consciousness is an absolute joke, because on standard scientific assumptions, standard materialist ontology, consciousness ought not to exist. On standard neuroscientific assumptions, net structure of the nervous system, phenomenal binding ought not to exist. Standard scientific assumptions, consciousness ought not to have a causal functional capacity to inspire discussion of its existence, like I'm doing now. So in practice, I think, the investigation of consciousness and nature of physical reality has scarcely begun. But I'm informed because intellectually I find the investigation of consciousness vastly more interesting than contemplating ultimate suffering and working out ways to reduce suffering. Clearly, I think we have an overriding moral obligation to fix the problem of suffering, and yet thinking about the nature of suffering, there were some wonderful graphic slides earlier, is deeply disturbing. If one isn't disturbed by the nature of severe suffering, one simply hasn't understood it. But after we have fixed the problem of suffering, essentially I feel that the whole enterprise of knowledge has scarcely begun, and that there are billions upon billions of entire spaces of knowledge latent in matter and energy, state spaces of experience that we haven't begun to navigate, and will safely be able to do so once we have managed experience below phenomenon zero. But until that happy day, essentially, morally, ethically, I think our overriding obligation is to fix the problem of suffering of humans and non-human animals alike, and which is why I'm very, very, very happy that Asher again would talk, and thank you, Adam, for inviting that.
Oh, absolute pleasure. For listening to you talk, Asher. No, I'm just wondering, Asher. We've taken up a lot of your time, and do you have any concluding remarks you'd like to part us with at this time?
Yeah, I guess nothing in particular. Keep up the good fight for people who are already kind of tuned into the badness of suffering. It's difficult being, having such a view in the world that we live in, because most people don't, hold these convictions. I guess things that are inconsequential still matter. If you can, even just have a tiny percentage or a fraction change in the conditions that farmed animals face, this makes such a big difference to consciousness at these spatio-temporal coordinates at this moment in history. It might be tiny relative to the total abundance of suffering, but relative to the weight of some human experience, it matters a lot. And I'm also something of an internalist about ethics. I think that states of consciousness don't just cease existing once we happen to perceive ourselves as being at a certain point in time or in space time. A valence state of consciousness at a particular spatio-temporal coordinates are there forever. Regardless of where I happen to perceive myself, as an agent that is implemented within the biological substrate. Every moment of experience that or every moment of suffering that we can relieve is changes space time forever and has an everlasting impact. Also promoting positive states of consciousness, if you can do something to this is maybe less or maybe more speculative or more disconnected from standard ethical advice, but trying to come at understanding other humans and other people from the perspective of understanding their feelings rather than trying to model their abstract beliefs. I genuinely believe that all miscommunication and misunderstanding comes from a failure of modeling the emotional states of other sentient beings. I think understanding, if you try and understand at a phenomenal level of how another being is feeling when given their world model and given their priors and given the predictions that their models make and whatnot, it actually have sympathy and empathy for all beings, even if it might seem like you disagree with them or you're diametrically opposed to them in certain respects, because actually just that misunderstanding can be dissolved if you really care about understanding how they feel. So I'll leave it with that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much, Asher, and thanks David Fierce for joining in, and also others who are in the audience just streaming Thank you for joining us. And if you'd like to subscribe to this channel, that will help me and the messages that this channel promotes. So thank you very much, Asher. And also check out Asher's online presence as well. And the links will be in the description there for you. So thanks everybody.